Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. My name is Nick Pasculli. I am the County Communications Director and Chief Public Information Officer for the County of Monterey. And this is our third situational press briefing since the incidents began with this atmospheric river that we are experiencing in Monterey County and on the Central Coast of California. First and foremost, I want to thank everyone for being here. I'm very happy that we have some very interesting guests with us today that'll provide some very good perspective with regard to situation going on here in the county and that affect not only the people of our county, the residents, but also the business community, et cetera. Joining us today, we have our Sheriff, Tina Nieto, who will be answering questions in just a few minutes. Just to get everybody a little bit of a warning, there is another very important meeting going on at the same time. So the sheriff will be monitoring that as well. So when we might have to just wait a second or two to hear Sheriff Nieto speak. We also have with us today Shaunna from our Monterey County Water Resources Agency, who will be addressing levee issues and river issues, both the Salinas and Pajaro River. We have representatives from our hospitality industry. Yesterday, we had folks from our ag industry. Today, we have representatives from the hospitality industry, which include Rob O'Keefe of the Monterey County Conventions and Visitors Bureau. We have Rick Aldinger from the Monterey County Hospitality Association. We also have representatives from our Public Works Department, Randy Ishii, our director, Tom Vonnegut, his deputy, with us today. And we're very fortunate at the last minute to have Blanca Zarazua, who is the Mexican consul here in Monterey County. And also hopefully joining us shortly will be the head of legal affairs at the Mexican Consulate office in San Jose. It's great to have them with us. It's very, very important to us, as everyone knows that we have a tremendous amount of our residents in Monterey County who are Mexican citizens or have dual citizenship, and having the support of the Mexican Consulate and the Consul's office here in Monterey County is important to what we do to support the people in our community. So like yesterday, we'll start off by getting a brief introductory statement from our guests that are going to be speaking today. And then we will open it up to some questions and answers. Prior to this press briefing, I sent everybody our afternoon situational update, which has a lot of facts and figures, and hopefully that'll help you generate some questions for our guests today. So first, since the sheriff is super busy, we're going to have the Sheriff Tina Nieto make some opening remarks, and then we'll go to our friends in the hospitality industry. Sheriff Nieto, welcome to our third press briefing, and welcome your comments.
Thank you, everybody. So let me just cover some of the questions that I get asked the most, and let's start with Pajaro. There's approximately 2,000 plus people that we've evacuated out of Pajaro. That includes 1 school, 2 mobile home parks, and over 800 homes. We have an order that do not drink the water in Pajaro. You can't boil the water because we know that there might be some chemical contaminants. We don't know what those are. Environmental is working on that. So please, bottled water only for drinking and doing the other things that you would want safe water for. The water is overflowing in most of the ag fills. Highway 1 is closed at Salinas Road and Riverside Drive. We are still using high water vehicles to do rescues for people that are finally want to leave their homes in different areas, mostly the Pajaro area. Pajaro at this time, we've done over 239 rescues in Pajaro by both boat and the high water vehicles. For the news agency, what I'm asking you to do is that if you're going to be in the Pajaro area and you see a deputy, you're allowed in a disaster zone. We're asking you to have your IDs, your news credentialing, so we know who you are. But if you're going to be in an area and you're going to do it by boat, please notify the sheriff's office, because we did have the dispatch this morning on some news crews because we didn't know who they were and we thought they were reported as looters. So help us out so that we don't unnecessarily have to dispatch out our personnel on you guys doing your jobs. I can tell you that business owners are constantly being assisted with details regarding the removal of large quantities of perishables and shutdowns of critical infrastructures. We're working with them, the sheriff's office, one-on-one. Right now, as we have our quieter times, even though it's flooded, because we do know we've worked with some restaurants, some of the bigger businesses in Pajaro, to try to get them into the area to get their stuff out, because the power is out in Pajaro. In the Arroyo Seco area, we've evacuated over 350 people have evacuated. There are about 20 to 40 residents that are sheltering in place and are staying. And as we move into the recovery mode, the sheriff's office, obviously working with our county officials, our state and federal partners, are going to have to figure out resupplying some of these harder to get to areas. For the Salinas River, we have numerous zones. I encourage you to go to the Monterey County website on the winter storm updates to see what areas are affected, because you'll find links there for the maps for both the warning orders and the evacuation orders. And I can tell you, along the Salinas River corridor, there are about 1,600 plus addresses that are affected. Fallen trees, obviously, we're dealing more with a wind event right now, even though there is still flooding going on. We caught a little bit of a break. The modeling changed from last night till this morning. As we talked about, it can change from hour to hour. And so some of the precipitation that we thought was going to be dumped into Monterey County has shifted south of us towards Paso Robles and into the Santa Barbara area. So they're now dealing with those issues, but we are monitoring any of the precipitation that's going into our waters that are going into our Salinas watershed, and the water people can talk about that if you have any questions. Elkhorn Road also is currently being patrolled by hot water vehicles due to the fact that some of the roads are impassable. Again, I encourage people to go to the county website. There's a lot of updated information, and the county folks, all the different teams, all the different departments are working hard to try to keep the best updated information we can in the middle of a disaster. So thank you, Nick.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff Nieto. I appreciate your time, and we'll get back to you with some questions as they come up. So next guest I'd like to introduce would be from the hospitality industry. I'd like to introduce Rob O'Keefe, who's the president of the Monterey County Hospitality Convention and Visitors Bureau. Rob, welcome to our third press briefing during this event.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm going to defer to my partner, Rick Aldinger, who is the chair of the Monterey County Hospitality Association. Let him go before me, because always age before beauty.
All right, Rick, welcome to our press briefing.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that warm introduction, Rob. I appreciate it. And thank you, Nick, and everyone else for putting this together. I'm sure there's not one of us who wants to be in a crisis situation like this, but at a time like this, it's critical that we're able to provide accurate and current information to our existing potential guests as they make decisions regarding visiting our destination, but also to our hospitality businesses, so they can properly plan and ensure that guests, our hospitality employees, are taken care of as best we can. Obviously, our primary focus at this time is for the safety of those travelers, of our own employees, and also for our community residents. Hospitality industry has always developed and maintained strong relationships with a variety of stakeholders. Times like this, that's proven to become incredibly valuable, allowing us to make the best decisions possible in support of not only our hospitality businesses and visiting guests, but also for our workforce and our residents. To that end, hospitality leaders are meeting regularly during these weather events among themselves, as well as with elected officials and other community representatives in an effort to stay current on the latest developments. And one thing I certainly want to point out, I want to give credit to the many hotels that have offered discounted evacuation rates, waived pet policies and made a number of other concessions in order to offer our local our local evacuees as many options as possible. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Rob.
Thank you, Rick.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Again, I'll just reiterate what Rick said. When crisis strikes, hospitality steps up, and particularly in times like this, providing options for residents as well as travelers to deal with this challenge. We've had over 30 hotels who are participating in our evacuation program. They can be found at cmonterey.com/evacuations. So it's SEE Monterey.com/evacuations. And there's a variety of different options there. We've heard from a number of these hotels that they've helped quite a few local residents, from the larger hotels to the smaller hotels. For example, the GM at the Ramada and Marina told us that they've accommodated dozens of displaced families. And that's one of the goals here, is to make sure that we're stepping up and providing a place for families along with their pets. And that's a big part of it, because if you live in Monterey County, your pet's really part of your family, and we want to make sure that those options are available to those folks. So getting the word on that is very important. This is a regional situation. Power outages, and there are some current ones right now, are limiting factors for how much the hotels can do. Even some of the hotels who want to help, when their power goes out, there's less that they can do. So we're in communication with Santa Cruz and San Jose, who both raised their hand and said, hey, we're able to rally our hotels to provide additional options. So that's something that we'll be looking to today and making those available. So once that's available, we'll be promoting those as well. And we're going to continue to collaborate with the county and the hotel community on how we can best mitigate the impact. And it's a tough situation, as we all know very well. We're looking out at the current situation, but we're also looking out in the future. And when we're making national headlines, a lot of national headlines, we're getting questions. I've had lots of questions from folks who are planning travel in April and May and in the summer and thinking, should I come to Monterey County? And of course they should. But we're handling it as best we could. And Nick, I want to compliment you, because I've heard you a couple of times, I think, on national news coverage on NPR, at least that I've heard, and really putting out a very balanced message. I think that's really important, and it's much appreciated. It'll pay dividends down the road. And that's it from me.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Rob. And now I want to turn to Shaunna Mary, who is one of our senior engineers for the Monterey County Water Resources Agency. I know everybody's anxious to know about what's going on in the Pajaro River, Shaunna, and the Salinas River. Might be worth noting that today we issued an evacuation warning for the Carmel River, which is being monitored. So Shaunna, welcome your remarks and your statement today.
Yes, good afternoon. Last night and today we've seen some of the storm kind of weaker patterns coming into the area, which is a sense of relief. But there have been some areas like the Navarro River and the Big Sur area that have gotten hit pretty hard with these storms overnight. So the forecasts in those areas are pretty close to what we're actually seeing. So with such a large geographical area, some areas are going to see, sunny skies, and it's going to be really raining hard in other areas. So we're monitoring, the entire watersheds. We're looking for those larger impacts throughout the systems. The systems are all very wet, so even small amount of rain is going to, potentially have larger impact. On the Navarro River, as I stated, we have pretty significant inflows into the reservoir, and we're continuing to be able to capture a lot of those flows, but we are releasing some of the flood control releases through the system to continue for safe operations. We're currently at about 86% capacity, and that's increasing throughout probably the next couple of days. San Antonio Reservoir is at about 50% capacity, and that's also slowly increasing. And we're just doing minimum releases of 10 CFS out of San Antonio Reservoir. Moving over to the Pajaro River levee, We have our primary breach at River Mile 10, our most upstream part of the levee. That stabilization effort continues through the night, through the day. The state is leading that effort. It's been a very challenging site. The conditions are very challenging. We continue to make progress, and you can see nighttime photos and daytime photos. We have a small gap left that needs to be stabilized. It's a fairly deep area and challenging to access. And so you can see here where the piece of equipment is, it's sitting on top of the repair, and then looking out forward, you're looking at the levee where it breached. So this is our last section to get this site stabilized. Once it's stabilized, then we'll start raising it up to the same elevation of the existing levee. And that's when we'll start seeing larger benefits for when stream flows do come through and the river rises. We really need to rise this repair, but our first, effort right now is stabilizing the site so the breach doesn't get bigger. We hope to have this done, and I'm hoping for today, but it could be tomorrow. And then it will take a couple of weeks to raise the levee, repair, and make it impermeable to water. So we are monitoring, inspecting the rest of the levee. We still have high flows throughout the Pajaro River levee. So we have engineers on site inspecting the entire levee. Water is flowing out through our culverts. So we have culverts throughout the area of Pajaro. And water is flowing through those, which is good news. That's draining the farm fields and the town of Pajaro. And then we also have the breach situation near the highway, below the Highway 1, near the ocean at River Mile 1, where water is flowing out to the ocean. Again, that's a beneficial breach. It happened naturally, and it's allowing the water to evacuate the flooded areas. And so we'll address that breach at the appropriate time when the system is more drained. Again, our next step is to finalize the stabilization of the breach, and then we will begin to raise that section, and that will be a couple of weeks. That concludes my update, but I can answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaunna, and we'll get to those questions in just a second. We're already getting some questions in the chat. I want to give our Mexican consul, Blanca Zarazua, a minute to say hello, introduce herself, and how the Mexican consul and the Mexican consulate's office in San Jose is supporting our residents in our community. It's a very important partnership that we have, and we're grateful that you're on the call with us today. And you can unmute yourself, Blanca. There you go.
I'll start in English and then just a brief few words in Spanish.
Thank you.
So for those of you who don't know, there is a Mexican consulate office in San Jose. It covers 4 counties, including Santa Cruz and Monterey counties. And basically, its mission is to provide support for Mexican nationals when they're away from home. I serve as Honorary Consul of Mexico for Monterey and Santa Cruz counties, and my office is in Salinas. And so we do get, we're kind of at the heart of the hurricane, if you will. When things happen, people will call desperate for information. We stand committed to the Spanish-speaking population, particularly Mexican nationals, since that is our mission. And I would like to introduce the fellow who will have all of the answers, unlike me. This gentleman is the Chief of Legal Affairs in San Jose, and he's a wonderful resource, and he has the right heart to get many people back on track after something like this that's so devastating. Y quería nomás decirles buenas tardes a todos, si están escuchando en español. Estamos aquí en el Consulado Mexicano para apoyarlos y sentimos mucho esta tragedia, pero estamos aquí para apoyarlos para que puedan reconstruir física y emocionalmente. Quisiera presentar a nuestro jefe de protección en San José, en el Consulado Mexicano en San José, el licenciado Rodrigo Navarro.
Thank you, Blanca. Muchas gracias. Thanks for being here. Thanks for having us in this conversation.
And
So-
bienvenidos, Rodrigo, for being with us.
Yeah, thank you. So what we're trying to do is tomorrow we're going to be on the ground. We're going to visit the shelters, trying to look for our community to provide assistance and make them aware of our resources. So basically the consulate can provide replacement of lost IDs, birth certificates, but also we can help them to relocate or probably to reconnect with their relatives, either here in the United States or in Mexico. We're also going to be just like having conversations with them to make an assessment and see if there's a possibility to provide financial assistance of emergency. So tomorrow we're going to be there with you on the ground, visiting all those shelters. Our Consul General may also join us in this visit. We just want to let you know that we are here. As Blanca just mentioned, she's our Honorary Consul in Salinas, but the jurisdiction of our consulate covers the 4 counties, Santa Clara, San Benito, Monterey, and Santa Cruz. So she's our great asset down there. But if you need something else from us, you can either call her directly or just reach out to us. Solamente quería agradecer a todos por el esfuerzo que están haciendo para ayudar a nuestra comunidad. El día de mañana vamos a estar ahí visitando los distintos albergues, tratando de ver si nuestra comunidad necesita asistencia para reponer identificaciones, quizá también para poder reubicarse, tratar de establecer contacto con sus familiares en México o en Estados Unidos, y analizaremos si es posible también dar un poco de apoyos o asistencia financiera en casos de necesidad. So that's basically it. I'm waiting for questions if you have any of them, but thanks for having us, and anything you need from the Mexican Consulate, please don't hesitate in reaching out to us. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Rodrigo. We're glad you're here with us. Okay, so let's move on. We do have representatives from our Public Works Department, and I'll give them an opportunity to make a statement if they want, either Tom or Randy. Then if there's questions that have to do with public works issues, these gentlemen will be happy to answer. Randy Ishii is the director of our Public Works Department, and I just to say anecdotally, our Public Works Department is a bunch of hardworking men and women that are braving the storm day and night, 24 hours a day in dangerous situations. And we're grateful, Randy, for your team. Welcome to our briefing today.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, Nick. And truly, it's all thanks to our very hardworking men and women from the Public Works Department who are helping to reopen our roads and keep our roads safe and open for the public. Joining me this afternoon, as you mentioned, is Tom Vonnegut, Assistant Director, and the community we recognize has been through and has weathered so many challenges over the course of this last week. We've had the combination of the Salinas River flooding, and we've had the combination of the Pajaro River levee breaking and having the flooding and inundation there in the North County, affecting that community and so many of our motorists. With that, we continue to monitor our roads, and we continue to float information as quickly as possible through our PIO team, and also post it onto the DEM and the road closure information page that the DEM page looks at, to post where any road closures are located. While we do that, and as the floodwaters recede, our teams are working extremely hard and as fast as they possibly can to assess the roads for any damages and determine if the roads can be made passable. As soon as they can be made passable, we'll be updating the information, that road closure and information page, so that we can do our primary mission of keeping the roads open for the public or reopening them as quickly as we can. Some could take longer than others because of the extent of damages, and that will all be part of our damage assessment process. And we will continue to update our information that we provide to our public as quickly as we can. In terms of service interruptions that we're seeing, not only is it in terms of roads, but it's also in terms of wastewater for certain communities. We do provide a wastewater service to certain communities, and they have been impacted as well. So we need to do our damage assessments on places like Chular and Pajaro here as the floodwaters begin to recede, and determine the extent of damages and repair or temporary measures as necessary. With that, we do want to leave you with a closing informational reminder for our entire public that as we work on these roads and as we try to warn the public, we we please need the motorists to adhere and obey our signage. When the road is closed, it means closed. Please turn around, don't drown. There's hidden dangers that are behind those signs. And the last thing that we need is for someone to go beyond the signage and need law enforcement support or some type of rescue support. So with that, we continue to encourage you to look at our road closure information page. We continue to move forward with our mission. Our people are working extremely hard, as I mentioned before, and we will continue to do so as we have in the past. And with that, we'll be available for questions at the end. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Randy. So I'm going to go to the questions now, and I'm going to start, and I've been starting with hands raised all week long, but I'm going to go to the chat first because there's a whole bunch of them in the chat. And there's a number of them that regarding public safety. I know we've been joined by Under Sheriff Keith Boyd as well. So if the sheriff can't respond, maybe Keith can, but let me just try to encapsulate these into one big question. One question is about water rescues and how many were there. One reporter is asking that they heard on a scanner that there was one on Red Bluff Road, if they can confirm that. Also, any arrests related to criminal activities. We reported there was one arrest yesterday. Any issues of looting since yesterday with regard to criminal activities. And then let me see, there was another one for the sheriff's office. Folks in Pajaro, nope, that was it. That was the two questions about looting and about rescues. So if the sheriff, maybe you can answer those questions.
So let's cover looting, excuse me, first. And so we are deploying extra patrol to the areas that we're shutting down. So however, we need residents' help to leave the areas when we do shut them down. Because here's what's happening, folks. We're responding to calls of people who aren't leaving the areas that are shut down because they're getting reported as looters, and then it turns out they're not being reported as looters. We don't have the resources to keep telling people over and over again to please leave an area because it's dangerous. So we really do need the help from the public to, kind of follow what the county is recommending to do. We also don't have the resources again to be, forcing people out of their house. We're not going to do that as a sheriff's office. We're going to do what we think is best for the community. We did have one arrest on one looter. We've deployed other people out on people that were reported as looters, but we didn't have enough to show that they were looting. So we don't know if they were or weren't, if they had nefarious, intent for that area. But when we do come across these people or get reports of these people, and when we identify them, we are doing what they called field interview cards. So in case something does happen later that's reported that we weren't aware at that time, we can connect them to possible crimes. And then we're asking those people to leave. And if they don't, those folks could get cited or arrested if they don't leave the area. As far as rescues, I think I reported the numbers earlier. We have made more rescues since I reported yesterday, or Keith reported yesterday. We continue to make rescues. There's a little more sporadic, and these are mostly people that have decided that they no longer want to stay in their residents that are uninhabitable, and especially the Pajaro area. Again, there's no water or clean water. There's no power. And we don't know when that'll be returned back. And so we're asking people to please move to shelters if they can. I understand it's very difficult for everybody. It's very different economic situations for everybody. But we're just really asking for people to cooperate with us in regards to this disaster that we're dealing with.
Thank you, Sheriff. Steve Gorman from Reuters has a question. Is there an estimate of the total number of individuals or homes that are under mandatory evacuation or orders? Are rivers and streams overtopping the banks today? Has there been a renewed flooding from this latest storm? Steve, let me answer that question. At least part of it. There's about 16,000 people that are affected by either evacuation orders and warnings throughout the county. And that probably will go up today because we issued a new warning just a few moments before this press briefing. With regard to rivers and streams overtopping, I'm going to ask Shaunna Mary to weigh in on that one regarding today's conditions. Shaunna?
So there are areas of high water level still. All the areas have not receded. So it is important to be aware, have situational awareness. Water that's still outside of the riverbanks in various areas throughout the county on all of the river system.
Thank you, Shaunna. We have Jacob Rogers from the Mercury News with a question in the chat. What is the latest estimate for when residents may be able to be back into their homes, houses? No specific date. Are we talking days, weeks, perhaps even longer than months? So I can tell you that right now, these areas that were flooded and remain flooded are still under an evacuation order. So therefore, it's not going to be a matter of days. And in addition to that, a damage assessment has to be done in order to ensure that homes are safe for people to return. Jacob, I can tell you that we are all very concerned about that. As the sheriff indicated, we want people to get back into their homes as soon as possible, and we're going to do whatever we can to make that happen. But there's going to be cases, without a doubt, that people will not be able to return to some of their homes. So that's where our state and federal partners become very important part of the equation when we get into the recovery phase. I don't know if Public Works would like to weigh in on that, or any of our other county colleagues, but be happy to have you respond as well. Okay. There's a question for hospitality industry from Victor Guzman from Telemundo. Victor, would you like your question answered in English and Spanish? Daniel Gonzalez is available.
He actually answered it in the chat.
Okay.
That was Rob, right?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Rob took care of it in the chat that Watsonville hasn't been reached out to specifically yet, but there's a plan to reach out.
Okay,
Right.
great. I'm going to get to the hands raised in just a second. All right. So Shaunna, there's a question from the Associated Press of Stephanie Dazio. I hope I said that right. Shaunna, how tall will the levee need to be so it's at the same elevation as the existing levee? And I think perhaps Stephanie's referring to the repair.
Yeah, I can answer that. So we've put in about 10 to 15 feet of material in this first phase of the repair to just, go again, stabilize the site. And then we'll need to go an additional 4 to 5 feet for the final repair. We'll use different material at that point. And so that again will make it impermeable. So we'll have, again, about a 15-foot base on this first phase of the project, and then another 4 to 5 feet.
Great. And there's a follow-up question from a well-known reporter in the area, Felix Cortez from KSBW, our NBC ABC affiliate. What is the size of the remaining gap that has yet to be stabilized on the levee break? When will work begin on the second break?
So the contractor is out there continuously. And so as one phase ends, the next will begin. This last section, as I stated earlier, is the hardest part to close this gap. At this point, it's about 20 feet remaining. And so it's hard to estimate how long that will take, but it'll be about 20 more feet before we can start rising the entire length of the breach.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Question in the chat from Nyla, I think it is. I'm not sure what news agency you're from. Are you I'm sorry, ABC, NBC News, I beg your pardon, Nyla Charles, ABC, NBC News, NBC. Is there anything being done to help Pajaro evacuees get to the shelter? Many say they can't get there since they had to leave their cars behind. I can answer that question. We have an arrangement, a very strong arrangement with Monterey Salinas Transit Authority to provide transportation to and from shelters and to temporary evacuation points. That transportation is still ongoing. Those buses are running on a regular basis, more or less on demand. Those arrangements have been in place since the very first shelters and temporary evacuation points have opened up. We're making every single effort we can to make sure this happens in a timely fashion. There may be cases where a person might have to wait a few minutes because a bus is in transit, but those bus stops are identified by signage provided by Monterey Salinas Transit, and there's there's a phone number people can call 211, which is a partnership we have with United Way if they're having any issues or need additional information and referral. I'm going to go to John Woolfolk. John, you have your hand raised. You had a question in the chat. I'm not sure if the hand raise is the same as the chat, but go ahead and introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hi, thank you, John at the San Jose Mercury News. Just wanted to ask, as we've heard from several of the growers in the Pajaro area, there's some frustration, obviously, with the flooding, and they feel like the Pajaro levee has not gotten the attention of that it deserves over the years, and they sort of blame this on, not getting the work done or having maintenance done, and wanted to see what Monterey County has to say about that, in response to them.
Thank you for your question, John. And I think Shaunna, you can answer that question about maintenance. And we're fortunate to have Norm Group back from us from the Monterey County Farm Bureau. So maybe after Shaunna answers, Norm might have some additional information. Shaunna?
So the Pajaro River Levee is a core federal project, and so it was originally constructed by the Army Corps of Engineers. Monterey County Water Resource Agency is the non-federal sponsor responsible for the operation maintenance of that levee. We are a special district, and so we collect funds in different zones to do all of our services. So we have two funding sources for the Pajaro levee. We call them zones 1 and 1A in the Pajaro Valley area. And that's an assessment that's on the landowners. We bring in that revenue, and then we do the operations and maintenance on an annual basis. So that local funding is somewhat limited, but it has been utilized to perform annual maintenance. The new federal project that was developed and authorized back in 2019, that's there to reconstruct these levees. It was determined a long time ago that the current levees are not adequate. They don't meet the current standards to really stop large storms from overtopping. And so they were reauthorized to be rebuilt. We have the funding. The federal government has provided that funding. The unfortunate thing is there's a long timing window to get that done. So in 8 to 10 years from now, it'll be fully rebuilt, but that is a long time to wait. So as I stated, we have done the maintenance based on the funding that we do receive. The new funding has been approved to do enhanced maintenance going forward, as well as reauthorizing new levees that are set back and larger so that overtopping events, which is what we experienced here with the failure, that the water couldn't be contained within the river channel, it overtops and then it erodes the levee. So that's not necessarily a maintenance issue, that's a capacity issue. And so those issues will be addressed with the reauthorization of a new levee structure.
Thank you very much, Shaunna, for that. I want to turn to Norm and see if Norm has any comments with regard to the issues with farmers and their thought process behind what's happening.
Sure. So I will speak to the Salinas River and what is happening on that particular river channel situation at this point. The first part of this to understand is the Salinas River is privately owned. All the landowners are responsible for the actual river channel itself, which is very unusual in California. And that in itself has created a complexity of issues related to permits and allowing work on either levees or in the channel itself to manage capacity flow as well as vegetation and sandbars. So we've been challenged for 3 decades now trying to manage the Salinas River channel itself, and particularly the levees, and those are now aging 7 decades or more old, needing substantial repairs at this point, obviously, but challenging with the various different agencies that are managing the river system and getting those permits for the landowners to do that. Not only is it difficult to get the permits, but it's a very expensive process for all the landowners concerned. So it's something we've been working on for many, many years in partnership with the Water Resource Agency, as well as our Resource Conservation District of Monterey County.
Thank you, Norm, and thank you again for being here today. I'm going to go back to the hands raised now and recognize Haley Smith from the Los Angeles Times. Haley, please say hello and ask your question.
Hi, thanks for doing this. This question was for Sheriff Nieto. I heard what you were saying about the bottled water and not boiling or drinking the water, but we're hearing from residents in the Pajaro area that are saying they can't leave to get water bottles. Some people are saying they've shown up at a bridge trying to get it handed over and they're being blocked. So can you comment on what efforts are being made to get bottled water to people?
So Haley, these folks that are not getting their bottled water are in an area that's been evacuated. And so when you leave an evacuated area, we don't let you in once you've left an evacuated area. We've evacuated you for a reason. If we're, at this point for the sheriff's office, and I don't know what we're doing for recovery, is that we're asking people to please leave. The sheriff's office does not have the resources to be delivering water. If there's a life-threatening emergency, yes, we will be there. Absolutely. And very, we've had no injuries to date in the county area due to this disaster, I think because of the messaging and the cooperation that we've had for our community. So I know that we've been working with businesses, trying to get some of the food out of areas before it all goes bad, to get to our shelters, to get to people to help out what's going on. But what I can say is that we need people to leave. We're not going to be delivering to a closed area. There's a risk. That's why we close the area. It's a risk to stay there.
Well, thank you for that. And just as a quick follow-up, we're also hearing from people that some shelters are full. So do you know if that's true? And if so, is there anything being done to remedy that?
I can respond to that, Haley. So the Santa Cruz County Fairgrounds shelter is at capacity. There are 2 additional shelters that have been opened in close proximity. One is at Cabrillo College, and I believe one is at the Watsonville Rec Center. I don't have that paper in front of me, but there has been 2 additional open. There's also one in Castroville, which has capacity, and all other shelters in Monterey County have capacity, including Salinas, Greenfield, and the Salvation Army. And transportation is being provided for to those shelters by Monterey Salinas Transit Authority. And additionally, with regard to water distribution, or I should say water is available at the shelters, as is food and other supplies like toiletries and things of that nature. So we are making every effort to make sure that the needs of the people are met, because we feel that's a very big responsibility that we have, and we take it very seriously.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go now to Pam Marino has a question from the Monterey County Weekly in the chat with regard to PG&E. And PG&E representatives were invited to this press briefing. I don't know if anybody has signed on from PG&E. Has anybody signed on from PG&E?
I'm here.
Okay, great. Stu, thank you very much, Stu. The question in the chat is, has PG&E communicated to the county number of crews repairing downed lines, damaged equipment? Where can residents in unincorporated areas go for help if they've experienced extended periods of outage? Would you be able to answer that question, Stu?
Absolutely. So as the information is requested by Monterey County OES, EMA, and the EOC, we provide that regarding units. We have approximately 80-something crews throughout the county now doing what we call make safe operations because of the high winds and the safety concerns presented by falling trees. We're very limited in the work that we can do. We have certain regulations about when we could be up in a bucket truck and when we could be up on a pole. And while our crews tend to push that envelope a little bit, we also want to make sure that there's a safety at the forefront. There are evacuation centers set up. We somewhat defer to the county for that notification. And we coordinate with Monterey County OES as part of that. So, that's what I got.
All right, thank you, Stu. And let me go to Jonathan Linden, who's got his hand raised. Jonathan is from KAZU. Jonathan, welcome.
Thank you so much. The first question I have is just to confirm with what Sheriff Tina Nieto said earlier, which was that there are no casualties, no injuries still to this date. And then I have a quick follow-up.
Sheriff, your mic's not working.
Hi, I'm back. That's correct. In the city of Pacific Grove, there was a firefighter that was injured from a falling tree at the beginning of the wind event. For the county area, though, we don't count that. And the firefighter is doing better. And so our prayers are with the city of Pacific Grove.
And then thank you, Sheriff. And then Nicholas, we have a question about a potential diesel spill that happened in Pajaro. We heard reports about this. We've been asking often about whether the pesticides, maybe Norm Groot could address it, but we're hearing that there's no known industrial waste, no known industrial chemicals, and then yet when you go by Pizzini Farms, you see that almost the entire thing is underwater, and it makes you wonder if it's not diesel, if it's not pesticides, is there anything getting in there that could wreak havoc on our environment or the health of our fellow community members? And with that, that's the end of my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan, for your question. Let me answer that with regard to the diesel. So there was an observed diesel sheen at around 7 p.m. Who's not muted? Okay. There was an observed diesel sheen at around 7 p.m. on Monday, yesterday. I can't remember what day it is. We launched a drone surveillance this morning to determine whether or not there was an issue as a leak. And at the particular time of the drone launch, there was no observed sheen in that particular location as reported. And there was no observable leak. And as a follow-up to that, the high water vehicle was dispatched with an assessment team. So we could have boots on the ground, including the technician from that particular facility. It was determined that the power was on and there was no visible leaks on those tanks. And further, the tank's measurements measured the same recorded measurements that were prior to this atmospheric weather event. The County of Monterey's Health Department, Environmental Health Bureau is continuing to monitor the situation, and that's all the information I have.
Just a quick follow-up, Nick. Are we still at the point where we're not able to say whether just writ large, and perhaps Mr. Groot can speak to this, but the fields, the pesticides, ammonia, things like that can be incredibly important for our ecology and our health, any kind of monitoring of that. And it's pretty common in floods to see this type of thing happen.
I'll be happy to see if Norm has any information. Mr. Groot?
Yeah, I do not have any further information other than the safeguards that are required when storing these types of chemicals on farms are in place. And I don't have any specific information about any specific items that were either leaked or spilled at this point.
Thank you, Norm. And I'll just offer an anecdotal comment, Jonathan. I spent 20 years of my career in the agriculture industry, and farmers in the Salinas Valley are very conscientious about environmental stewardship. So I know they would take protective measures to remove things from fields if they knew their fields were going to be in harm's way. So with that, we'll wait for more information from environmental health. This is something that we are monitoring, and the County of Monterey is committed to environmental stewardship. Let me go to the next question. For the consulate, for the Mexican consulate office, from Edgar Oliveras. Edgar, would you like your response in English and Spanish?
I'm in the same office as him, Nick. Yes.
Okay, great. So we'll do English and Spanish. For the consulate, what's the message for people afraid to ask for help due to their immigration status?
Thanks for the question. In regards to that, like the message that the consulate is sharing with the community is they don't have to be afraid of accepting or receiving services from the local resources and the local authorities. We are also posting through our website and our social network channels messages about where are those shelters, how to react, how to respond to the local authorities. So during the pandemic, we had this conversation with our community. So we are expecting them to trust the local enforcement, the sheriff's office, but also the people from the county. And tomorrow, when we're visiting them at the shelters, that's going to be the same message. Like they need to trust you, and they need to trust either the federal government, the state government, and also the local governments. Nuestro mensaje para la comunidad indocumentada es que no tienen que tener miedo ni temor a alguna repercusión migratoria para recibir ayuda o obedecer a las autoridades. El mensaje que hemos tratado de darles durante todo este tiempo, particularmente durante la pandemia, va centrado justamente en eso, en que no tienen que tener miedo a repercusiones migratorias a raíz de recibir un recurso o obedecer las indicaciones de la autoridad. Mañana que estemos ahí en los albergues vamos a tratar de pasar el mismo mensaje, que no tienen que tener miedo y que tienen que confiar en las autoridades, ya sea federales, estatales o locales, porque no va a haber ninguna repercusión de carácter migratorio. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo. And also, I'd like to add that, you know, for the better part of 20 some odd years, I've known Blanca Zarazua, who's the honorary consul here in Monterey County, and she's very active in the community and doing outreach. And the county works very, very closely with a number of community-based organizations that provide services to the Spanish-speaking population. Blanca, would you like to add any additional comments to Rodrigo?
Yes, I can't see myself, but I'll just have faith that I look okay.
You do. You look great. You look wonderful.
Okay. Sí, muy buenas tardes. Yo creo que el temor realmente aquí es en no dejar sus casas cuando les han avisado que hay un peligro, al no abandonar la casa. Digo, si tienen temor, yo creo que eso es donde tienen que dirigirse, porque las autoridades hacen sus investigaciones y saben por qué les están diciendo eso. Entonces, no tengan miedo de las autoridades, están allí para ustedes y están para guiarles cuando realmente es necesario abandonar el hogar. Por favor, respeten esa sugerencia, porque está basado en personas que son expertos en condiciones y por favor hagan lo que les dicen, porque si no podrían ser las circunstancias mucho más difíciles y trágicas que las que tienen ahora. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Blanca. I want to go back real quick. Suzanne, you're going to be next. I just want to go to a question that's in the chat and would be for Mr. Norm Groot. The question is, how soon do you think harvesting can begin in the flooded areas?
I kind of responded to that in the chat, but I will say, you know, it depends on when we can get back in the fields and actually start planting so that we have something to harvest. And that is after a protocol for testing of soil and irrigation water and equipment, which is required for food safety. So it will be some time before we can start planting again, probably on average about 60 days to 90 days, depending on how those tests are and how fast the fields are drying out, so that we can get in and look at what we need to do there. But overall, harvest is going to depend on the planting schedules, which at this point are obviously being delayed.
Thank you, Norm. Now I'm going to go back to the hands raised. Suzanne, please introduce yourself and let us know what news outlet you're with.
Yep, I'm Suzanne Rust. I'm with the Los Angeles Times. I am curious about information I received this morning about water that had floodplain water that had moved out of the river, was flowing downstream, pushing along the bridge that goes under Highway 1. and potentially threatening utility lines that run through a levee there, as well as the wastewater treatment facility. There was a discussion that there could be a manual breach put downriver, and I'm wondering what the status is of that.
That's a great question, Suzanne. I do not have Caltrans on the phone. I don't know if Randy Ishii, our Director of Public Works, or Tom Vonnegut, is the deputy, is able to answer or provide some insights on that. Randy or Tom, do you have any insights?
This is Randy from Public Works, Facilities and Parks, and also on the line is Ms. Shaunna Murray from Water Resource Agency. What we can comment on is that there is a multi-agency collaborative that is talking about the Highway 1 bridge, the utilities, and the levees. That set of discussions is still ongoing, and that's at this time, that's as much as we at Public Works can comment on. We are aware that there's utilities down there. We're making provisions for the pertinent utilities to Public Works. That said, there's a lot that's still in motion on that topic. And I'll look to Water Resources if they'd like to comment any further.
Thanks, Randy. Yeah, it is a multi-agency effort. Again, we have people in the field monitoring the condition of the levee and kind of evaluating options at this point. There isn't an action plan that's been approved or moving forward. And so this is kind of one of those dynamic situations that we're monitoring, and we can provide more information as we know it.
Thank you both very, very much. Going back to the chat, we have a question from Farida Romero with KQED Public Radio. How long is flooding in Pajaro expected to remain? How long is the county planning to keep shelters open for displaced residents? And can you please talk about any resources available for displaced farm workers and other residents, regardless of immigration status, for the week? I think the Mexican Consulate's office talked about providing resources to their Mexican nationals. With regard to shelters, the County of Monterey is not going to abandon people. We're going to keep the shelters open as long as we need to, in order to make accommodations for folks. And then when we hopefully, with our help from our state and federal partners, which is a very important piece of this puzzle, we definitely need the President of the United States to give us a declaration of disaster. They did declare an emergency, but we definitely need this federal government to declare a disaster so we can get that much needed federal support and federal funding to move into the recovery phase, which includes support, as you all know, from FEMA, the SBA, other government agencies, state and local government agencies, the EDD, et cetera. And additionally, with regard to displaced farm workers, I think Mr. Groot talked about this a little bit yesterday. Norm, if I say something out of turn, please correct me. But many of the farm workers in our area, a lot of the farming operations in the western part of the United States are still happening in Arizona and the desert, Brawley, El Centro, and those areas, Oxnard, Ventura. And so the farm workers that may be displaced up here, many of them work for labor contractors, contracting companies that move folks from different locations or different companies based on the needs of those companies. So we feel confident, and I think the industry feels confident, that there's going to be jobs for people. The Employment Development Department of the state of California, once we get into the recovery phase, will provide for things like unemployment and whatnot if those types of services are necessary. So I think there's a lot going on. Our community as a whole, the County of Monterey, the people of the County of Monterey are very much welcome and embrace the people from Mexico that are working here in this country. We have very good community relations, and people really support one another. It's a very wonderful thing that happens here in our county. I don't know if Norm or Blanca or Rodrigo would like to speak about that.
Yes, I go ahead.
I'll just say, Nick, you encapsulated it very well, and we are doing our best to manage the labor situation so that many who are currently in situations where fields are flooded are able to either through their labor contractor work for other farming operations in the area. But as Nick stated, we're still operating a lot of our farming operations in the desert area of Imperial County and Yuma, Arizona. So a lot of our workers have not yet returned to Monterey County.
Thank you. Blanca?
I just wanted to confirm what everyone suspects, that there's tremendous fear out there in the labor market. The economy in the subculture, if you will, of farm workers is really, really suffering dire straits right now. Some of it is real because there are no jobs, and some of it is just fear of the future, that there will be no jobs, and not everybody can move here and there. Maybe dad can move, husband can move, but you can't move the whole family, and especially if you don't have a home here. What stuff do you have to move to wherever? And so I think we need to be extra sensitive, and I want to corroborate what has been said in terms of having a very, very collaborative community. This is not a divided community. This is a collaborative community where people with resources will help others with limited resources.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Okay, next question. We're getting close to our time. But yes, I think it's important to note that the Community Foundation for Monterey County has set up a fund for disaster relief, and we encourage those that can that have the means to do so to support the Community Foundation with their financial support. And as we understand it, the Santa Cruz Community Foundation has done the same thing. I'll get to one more question before we wrap up for today. By the way, I did post the recording link to the yesterday's presser, and it's at the top of the chat. And I will be doing the same thing this evening when this finally gets uploaded in our system. Steve Gorman from Reuters, a county distributed a fact sheet earlier today that puts the number of people under evacuation orders at approximately 21,000. Orders or warnings at about 21,000. I believe Mr. Pasculli number was 16,000. Which is the better number? I think, Steve, you're right. We put out a new report and I gave an old number because I didn't have the new report open. So my apologies for that. Own my own mistakes. All right, so that concludes our press briefing for today. We will have another one tomorrow. We will make an attempt to get folks from Caltrans on the call tomorrow as well. We'll keep you posted. And then this evening, when we put out our final situational update, that'll get emailed to you all as well. Once again, on behalf of the County of Monterey and the residents and the businesses, we appreciate your attention. They need your help. They need your support. They need the national leaders to get on board and give us the help that we need. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.